He says that all the backlash just proves his point. And he joins us now. Good to see you, Congressman.
Good to see you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So when you talk about this appraisal of your party and what it was, what do you isolate as the problem and the solution for you Democrats?
Well, look, there's no one problem with this election. I mean, we got wiped out across the board. There were things that the Harris campaign should have done differently, like separating herself from the president and simply answering questions about these contentious policy issues, having a response to Trump's attack on trans people, for example. That would have helped. But we also just have to have a fundamental reckoning as an entire party with the fact that a lot of Americans, the majority, don't trust us on a lot of core issues. And it's not just these these culture issues, although I do think identity politics is part of the problem. It's also the economy. I mean, how is it that Trump comes in and says he's going to have policies to dramatically raise tariffs, cut taxes for billionaires, which will raise prices for everyday Americans, and yet Americans trust him more on the economy? How is it that we've got a border policy that's focused around just deporting millions of people that, if you believe the economists, will create a recession greater than the Great Depression because we'll lose so many workers, not to mention communities, families disrupted across the country? We had a bipartisan border deal, and yet the bottom line is people trust the Republicans more on immigration. So we got to look ourselves in the mirror as Democrats and say, how do we reconnect? How do we reconnect with the majority of American voters? Because we've clearly lost touch.
You know, I've been getting some heat also, but that's what I signed up for. You know, having your own party go after you is a little bit of a new experience. Democrats do that more often than Republicans. But I call it the woke to broke ratio. There's nothing wrong with being woke. There's nothing wrong with wanting to protect minorities and protect the marginalized. And I got to be honest, I don't believe there's a good chance that your girls are going to encounter somebody our size playing against them on the field. But I get why, as a theory, one would be too many. I get it. It's not a high-risk problem, but one is too many. You look weak in that argument. But you guys didn't focus enough
we can talk about it.
On owning. You can talk about it. That's fine. But you can't just punish people for not agreeing with you on it. And you didn't care enough about the status quo and who was hurting in terms of gas, grocery, rent, health insurance. It seemed like Harris was having to mitigate those issues because they were on her watch.
Well, that's right. But look, I mean, we subbed her in for Biden because he was losing the election, right? It was a tough decision. It came late. But the bottom line is that's why we made the switch. So her number one priority should have been separating herself from the president. And I said very early on, not just to her advisors, but also publicly, separate yourself on the border. Just get out there and say, our immigration policy hasn't worked. I'm going to do it differently. Even on just that one issue, showing some distance from the president, showing that you can respect Joe Biden but disagree with him on some policies and pledge to do things differently, I think that would have really transformed the race for Harris. I'm not saying it's all on her shoulders. Like I say, we've got some real problems just as a party as a whole. We love to preach down to people, tell them when they're morally wrong without doing enough listening about the real concerns of everyday Americans. But there are some things that the Harris campaign could have done differently. The bottom line is we got to have a reckoning about all of this stuff, because if we don't come up with a new strategy, a winning strategy going forward, then we're never going to be able to stop the Trump agenda.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.